It's May 19th, and thank you all for attending our weekly Aging with Pride discussion group for the LGBTQ2S plus seniors and their allies. And thank you too to our partners, SAGE and the Pride Center of Edmonton. Before I introduce our speaker, I must acknowledge that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our lives. 2 housekeeping items. Firstly, I must let you know that this session will be recorded for future use on our YouTube channel. If you don't wish your image to be recorded, please close your video feed. And secondly, may I remind you of the code of conduct outlined in your Zoom invitation and then underscore a couple of points. Please respect the speaker by remaining muted during the talk. We will unmute you for the question and the answer period. Please be mindful of time limitations and keep your questions and comments as brief as possible so that everyone can participate. Everyone who wishes will be given an opportunity to ask a question before individuals who have already spoken will be recognized. And also, please respect the confidentiality of any personal information. And now, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce Kirk Kryvenchuk. For 30 years, Kirk's passion has been with the Edmonton Vocal Minority, Edmonton's queer choir. First, as its accompanist, he played the music for 11 years, and now as its assistant artistic director and general manager. Recognized by the Edmonton community with the Michael Phair Award in 2007, Kirk also serves on the board of Unison Choruses Canada and was a member of the steering committee that produced the Unison Festival held in Canada in 2018. A church musician for over 40 years, Kirk also runs a data management company with his partner. And now, Kirk.
Thank you, Jan. I'm really quite honored to be here. I've looked over the speakers that you've had in the past, and so many of them are my heroes. And that kind of is why I am doing what I'm doing, because it's been a journey to find out how I could contribute to the queer community without those kind of skills that some of these other people have. I acknowledge that I grew up as, I would say, a privileged gay boy. My family, although very religious, my dad was a part-time pastor, and my earliest memories are being stuffed into a sailor suit Sunday mornings, and the family driving out to Alberta Beach for my dad to pastor a church there. So church was very, very important in my family's life, and it was very conservative church, similar to the Baptists. It's the Christian and Missionary Alliance, the Church of Stephen Harper and Preston Manning. But it was early in my life that I figured out that music was what I wanted to do. And my parents and family were very supportive about this. They didn't try to dissuade me, or they did everything they could to encourage me in doing this. And I think that made the process of coming out much easier, because they didn't question or didn't try to change any of my ideals of becoming a musician and getting a real job. So they were very supportive of each of us becoming the person that we wanted to, and to follow our dreams. So I came out quite early, when I was like in my mid-teens, and shortly after that I got a permanent church job, and then a teaching studio with 40 students. So that gave me financial independence very early. So I was able to move out while I was still, in university. And basically then I left my parents to deal with this whole queer thing on their own. And I knew about PFLAG, but I didn't think that would be a very good fit for my parents. As it happened, my father's best friend was a man named Art Berwatsky, and his son, Murray Berwatsky, is a gay and one of the principals in the Evolution Wonderland Lounge. And of course, Murray's nephew, Rob Berwatsky, is also gay. So this family was quite close to my parents, and I think that really gave them the opportunity to discuss, being church people and growing up with, and having a gay son. So I let my parents deal with that on their own. I didn't push it, and so there was no conflict with the family at all. I still felt very supportive, and although I knew they weren't happy about it, it didn't ever drive a wedge between us. And I know I'm incredibly fortunate in that. And again, well, as I say, I was very fortunate. So, when I met my first partner, I think when I was 19, and we had a years-long relationship, and I was living the life. I was enjoying being a young gay man in the late 70s, early 80s, going out to the clubs, meeting people. It was pretty good, but I always knew that there was something, that there were things that happened to make this so easy for me. And I knew that there were people out there who'd sacrificed and struggled, and I was reaping the benefits. And I always felt that I would like to be part of that, but I never quite figured out how I could be contribute to the queer community. As it turned out, at that time, that was sort of the start of the whole gay choral movement with big choirs in New York and San Francisco. So I knew about that. But there was, there was a queer choir here in Edmonton, and Michael had something to do with that before Edmonton Vocal Minority was founded. But I didn't have anything to do with that. Calgary did have a gay choir, and they were invited by the Pride Center, and I'm not sure what the Pride Center was called back then, to come to Edmonton to do a benefit. And they recommended to the planners of this that maybe in Edmonton they could find a few singers that could join the Calgary group. So I believe it was Lorna Murray who got in touch with David Garber, who was a singer in Pro Coro, and Lorna was also working with Dorothy Henneveld, who was also a singer in Pro Coro at the time, and they knew David, and so asked him to be the conductor. And David called Jeremy Spurgeon, the organist at All Saints, a former teacher and good friend of mine, and Jeremy recommended my name to David. And I remember one Sunday afternoon, I got a call from David, and he asked if I would be interested in accompanying this group. And when he invited me to do that, it just kind of clicked in my head that this was the perfect fit for me. And it was some way that I could be a part of, contributing to the queer community and actually using the talents that I had to do that. And right from the start, although it's rather odd, I was, as the accompanist, I sat in on all the board meetings and worked with David in planning the concerts, and and the choir was a great success. At the beginning, we were looking at close to, actually a little over 100 members. It was a really exciting time for us. And one of the really amazing things we did was we invited the queer choirs from across the country to come to Edmonton for a weekend to perform. And I think that was 1998. And there's always been a group of queer choirs in the United States called Gala Choruses. And they have a festival every 4 years. And David and I had attended one of those festivals, and we realized, there are thousands of people here, and there are just hundreds of choirs. And a choir like Edmonton Vocal Minority just would not, it just wasn't a good fit. And it was very American centric. And so that gave David the idea that we should maybe do something, Canadian. So we did this one-off event. And the amazing thing is that 4 years later, Toronto decided that they were going to continue this, and now it actually happens every 4 years. A big dream of some of us early on was that we actually establish a national organization that could offer resources and support to choirs across the country, and that came to fruition just a couple of years ago. So now Unison Choruses is an ongoing group. It just doesn't form every time there's a festival. And we're working to, build up our resource library and offer different programming. And I've been really excited to be part of the board in doing that. So there was, David Garber was our conductor for, I think until 1999, just after this festival happened. And then we went through a period of looking for a new conductor. And during that time, I served as the interim artistic director, and we auditioned a few conductors and finally hired our current conductor, Paula Roberts. So being in charge of the whole organization, and that taught me, made me learn a few new skills. And I continued as the accompanist for a number of years after that, but I ended up doing a lot of administration jobs, and finally the choir decided, well, let's just create a separate position as a general manager, and then we hired accompanists to play for the choir. And I still get to play for the choir occasionally, and sometimes I'll cover a rehearsal or a community performance if our regular person can't do that. So music, of course, was the whole start of being involved in a choir. But after living with this for a while, I realized that this group was so much more than just a place for people to sing. And it is a place for people who just want to sing in a environment that's safe and supportive. And that's fine, but there's been so much more that I've seen over the years. I mean, there are people who who come, and they're, you know, they may identify as, you know, as straight, or, you know, questioning their sexuality or identity even. And through the choir, they you know, come out and made some important decisions in their life. And I think because music is so non-threatening, and the environment that we seek to create is just accepting of whoever and however people want to identify. So there's no pressure to be one way or the other. When Edmonton Vocal Minority formed, there were actually choirs who kind of said we're a closed membership, and only, you know, those who identify as gay or lesbian could join. And we thought, well, that's really ridiculous. So we've always been open to whoever supports the mission of the choir is more than welcome to join. So there'll be people who've used the choir to come out. And one of the most memorable instances was a husband and wife that came to the choir, and the husband came with the wife to support her because she was kind of questioning her sexuality. And through the choir, she actually met her partner, and they're married and living happily ever after. And, you know, sadly, that meant the end of their marriage. But to see, you know, the fact that this man was willing to do this for someone he loved, and realizing that it could mean the end of his marriage, was quite well, it left quite an impression on me. And although we don't consider ourselves a social group or a hookup group, there have been many couples who, you know, formed through the choir. I met my partner, Paul, 26 years ago when he joined the choir. And there are many other couples who are still together and still happy, and they met through the choir. So it offers people a place to meet each other without that being the main point of it. And at the same time, when we give our concerts and when we perform, we feel that we're saying something to not only the queer community, but to the community as a whole, that we're proud of who we are and we celebrate who we are. There are other choirs who choose their repertoire based more on social issues and things, and that's fine. But the direction our current artistic director likes to go is that we're here to acknowledge that there are still struggles, and that there are battles that have been fought and won, but we really want to concentrate on celebrating who we are and what we are. Over the years, we've had to learn new things, especially recently, and not only in our choir, but in choirs, you know, across the spectrum. It's involving trans people, and because trans voices can sometimes be problematic to fit into the overall kind of blend of the choir. So we've had to do a lot of studying and learning about that, and now we're rewriting most of our documentation so that we can be a little bit more gender neutral and more inclusive in how we, you know, address you know, we're not just men and women. I mean, we need to acknowledge the fact that there are non-binary members and there are people who identify differently than just the old black and white. So that's something that we've had to work at over the past few years. COVID, of course, brought a whole new level of challenges because we couldn't rehearse in person and everything was put online, and that totally created for a conductor a bit of a nightmare because she can't hear anybody sing. So she rejigged everything, and it was more about learning, you know, basic music skills and things like that. But we adapted, and we're now back to rehearsing in person. Although we only have about half our membership, but that's, I understand, pretty normal for most choirs across the country right now. So as I say, we feel that our concerts celebrate our queerness, and I think they also, for a lot of people, give a gathering place in the community. They might not be ones who want to go to dance on Churchill Square or do some of the other things. It's sort of a bit of an alternative. And I think we try to choose music that appeals to, you know, all demographics, because did we do rap? Yeah, we've even tried our hand at rap, but that's not really a strength of ours. But we keep trying to challenge ourselves musically to attract and entertain our audiences. I really don't know what else to say. So let's discuss.
Well, that was wonderful, Kirk. I do remember a rap performance. I think there was 4 or 5 singers that were involved. I think Evan was one, Tiffany was one. They had little lines in the whole song. I can't remember what the song was, but you know, at this age, my memory goes.
Hamilton, that's right. We did that tune from Hamilton, and actually that did go pretty good. Yeah.
Wow, the lineup of questions is starting. I see Michael has his hand up. Please go ahead, Michael.
Yes, thanks, and thanks, Kirk. It's great to see you here with us today too. And my memories with the choral group have been, you know, really wonderful over the years. And I'm someone who cannot sing a note, never would be somebody you'd want around. But as an audience, I've loved it. But I did want to ask, with the kind of the national organization, is the group still doing kind of one every 4 years, kind of a national get together?
Yeah. Yes. We were
kind of where the next ones might be a bit.
Yeah, we were scheduled for Halifax this year, but we realized that wasn't going to work because a lot of choirs hadn't even resumed rehearsing. So we put it off until the May long weekend of 2023, but it will be in Halifax. And then we should know, it's probably going to go back to Vancouver after that in 4 years' time, but Halifax for 2023. And Jan will be there with us, I hope, singing away. Yeah.
Thanks.
And Michael, you mentioned not being able to sing a note. Well, that's me. That's why I play the piano.
I actually am hoping to go to that Halifax Unison Festival, but I thought I would go as an audience member rather than a singer, but who knows what happens in another year. Larry, please go ahead.
Rather like Michael, I can't sing a note. My first experience with choirs was sort of a negative one. It was being kicked out of a church choir which I didn't think that one could do, not on the grounds of being gay, on the grounds of being such a terrible singer that I couldn't. But what I wanted to say, Kirk, was basically thank you. One of my strongest memories is of the national group performing, I think somewhere in the late 90s, as I recall, at City Hall. And the late 90s weren't a real positive time to be a gay man with all AIDS and everything else around. And how important it was to have something that was positive and something that brought the community together, and we look to thrive. So thank you and your colleagues for that. And I think, like sports, I'm not much of a sports fan, but I am a music fan, and those two things really do bring groups together. And I've seen that around the world, that choirs are a way of creating community. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Larry. You mentioned that about church choirs, and so many of our singers grew up in singing in church and in church choirs, and had to leave, for I think they could usually sing, but for sometimes they were kicked out because they were gay, or they just were not comfortable in that situation. So we get so many who come and say, well, I wanted to sing for so long, but I haven't had a safe place to do it. And you also mentioned that would have been our festival 98. The City Hall was pretty new, and the Windspear had just opened, and we were really lucky for our festival that we were able to book both of those venues, and that mass choir singing on the steps of City Hall with, I think, David Sarita and Heather Bishop. That was really a very moving time, and I think inspired not only our choir, but a lot of the choirs who were visiting cross country, that this was just so necessary for all these people to gather together and inspire each other with their music, and just to see singers from across the country is so affirming and really moving. And I can imagine, there are some small choirs like in Saskatoon, and for them to be involved in an event like this really makes a huge difference in their choir life and in their personal lives.
So Kirk, if you don't mind, I actually went to the Unison Festival in Calgary in 2018, and I had the great fortune of singing in a choir that had 260 plus members. It was just an amazing experience. You got one rehearsal, and then you went out and did a performance, and it was what an experience for this newcomer to the world of choir. But one of the statements that the person doing the opening ceremony said was that there are more people involved in choir than there are involved in the game of hockey. And that just blew my mind as to how big the choir community really is across Canada, across the States. I wonder if you had any thoughts of the numbers of people that the choir community is.
I don't have any numbers, but if one looks at the list of choirs for Edmonton, I think I'm still shocked to see how many choirs are here, and that means how many people are singing. And some of the choirs are huge, like the other choir Paul sings in is 150 people, and we get lots of choirs with 60 people, up to 100. Singing is really a big thing here in Edmonton, and other cities too, but Edmonton is really kind of noted for just having so many choirs. And in some ways that presents challenges because you're looking, you want, you're trying to track singers and members and audience. But on the other hand, for a singer is like, they can really pick and choose where they're going to feel the most comfortable. And we've had singers from our choir, move on and join other choirs that they actually felt, more comfortable with. Maybe it was the music repertoire, the difficulty of that, because we're a non-audition choir. So we always have to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. And there's only, I think, twice in our history of 30 years that our conductors actually had to speak to a couple singers because they weren't singers. So they were asked to maybe, try something else. But there are lots of people who sing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you. I see, Michael, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Kirk, in the last few years, certainly one of the highlights has been the concert that Darren Hagen is part of. How did that relationship come about?
Oh, well, we've always liked to have a host for our concerts. And we had a nice partnership with, what's the tall guy's name who's married to Candace Dorsey?
Timothy.
Tim Anderson. Yeah, he used to do our hosting. And I'm not sure. I mean, I kind of grew up with Darren because we were like flashback era. I mean, same age and that. And I didn't really know him, but we just invited him to do it. And he's been absolutely brilliant, especially with our Unison shows, because he actually writes a really good narrative for it. And that's something that actually people really appreciate when Edmonton Vocal Minority goes to these festivals, is we actually have a story or a show rather than just a string of pieces. So people have been really impressed with that. But as it stands, Darren is pretty loyal to the choir, and we're trying to be loyal to him when we've had to cancel the Pride concert in the first COVID year. We made sure that we paid the people we had asked to perform in that concert so they wouldn't lose out. But I can't really say other than, it started with one concert and it's just kind of been our tradition now. So we've always taken him on the road with us when we do our Unison Festival things. So he's on board for Halifax, and he's great. And I mean, I think the audience loves it because it's not just somebody coming up and saying, next we will sing this or that. We want to make everything about the show entertaining.
I can remember coming back on an airplane from Puerto Vallarta. The plane was fairly empty. I sat, there were 3 seats, but there's only 2 people in the row. And I sat beside this lovely, handsome young man who had the most colorful pants on. And we started chatting, and I said, like, how many questions is it going to take before we find someone that we know in common? And I told him that I curling with Pride, and that I sang with Edmonton Vocal Minority. And it just happened to be Trevor Schmidt who wrote a song that we were singing that year in our final concert. And what a treat, and what a small world it was to meet that gentleman.
That is so cool. Yeah, that was one of the songs the choir sang in Calgary. Trevor and Darren wrote it for one of their musicals. So, yeah.
Well, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say it. Looking back now after 30 years and looking at our alumni and people who have sang in the choir in the past, I mean, it's really a cool list to go through. And a lot of these names pop up every once in a while, and it's interesting to see that all these connections to the choir are there, even though they're not singing these days, but they've given the choir something, and hopefully they've also taken something away with them.
Kirk, I wonder if you would talk us through what it's like to put on a production, for, let's say you're booking the Bus Barns or something like that. Like what are the steps that you have to do to put on the major events?
Well, I should have written this down, because after 2 years of not doing it, I'm finding it a little difficult to actually try to remember all the details. But I mean, basically, especially if you want to get the Westbury Theatre Bus Barns, you're looking at a 2-year, you have to book 2 years in advance. And this has always been a bit frustrating for us, because when we were doing the parade, when we had the Pride parades, we certainly didn't want to conflict with that, because the choir wanted to be in the parade, and you couldn't get a date from the Pride committee 2 years in advance when they're going to have the parade. So that's always been a bit of a touch and go situation, but you do have to do a lot of booking in advance for the bigger venues. I mean, the venue we're using this June is a church that's got lots of space in it, so we can socially distance okay, and that didn't take a lot of time to book. But the big venues, if we wanted anything decent and getting weekend dates, you're looking at 2 or 3 years. So usually what we'll do, or what I'll do, is I'll book 2 or 3 years at one go, so we know that we've got the venue. And if the parade changes, which it had done a few years, sometimes we've had to adjust those days. So that's been a bit frustrating. We've got pretty much our musicians who we like to work with and who likes to work with our choir. And I usually let Paula, go ahead and contact them. So that needs to be done. The ticket sales needs to be organized, and, I keep track of that. And a big resource for selling tickets, of course, are the members of the choir. And so I coordinate all that and put together the PR stuff, do the posters and graphics and that sort of thing. We could probably do more, but since there's only me kind of doing all of that, I tend to have my focus actually on internal communication with the choir, making sure the choir has all the links that they need to practice their music, and that they know what they've got to wear for the concert, and that you can't wear white socks with black pants, and all the little details. So I find myself being distracted by that, whereas I would like to do more external promotions. But anyway, that falls under my duties, and of course preparing the program. And what else? Oh, I guess catering, if we have catering. I mean, if our concerts at the Westbury Theatre, they run the bar and take care of that, so I don't have to worry about that. When we do a cabaret, which is usually in another church setting, then I have to, figure out who's going to bring what to eat. So it really depends on the event, what I need to take care of. And unfortunately, we don't have a really robust committee structure for the choirs, so I can't say, well, this committee will take care of that. I tend to be the committee of everything, and part of that's my own fault, because I've accepted the fact that sure, I can do this, so I'll do it. But I think to be healthier organization. That's something we need to work on. But as it stands, I'm pretty happy doing all that. Does that answer your question? Is there any great
Is there
secret?
anything you'd have to do with any sound technicians or lighting technicians or stagehands, or, you know, does the theater provide all that stuff? Or
Usually the theater will come with that. Now, our concert in June, we are, actually, I think we do have sound equipment that comes with the venue. But as it happens, the husband of Paula, our conductor, is a professional sound guy. And so they know way more about that than I do. So that's one thing I leave to Paula and her husband, Jamie. So even when we do the Westbury, he'll actually, we'll actually have him up in the sound booth doing the audio mixing and that. So that is something I should learn about, because he's not going to always be around. But I've been lucky in that we've had him as a resource too. And Paula knows a lot about that kind of stuff too. So I don't have to worry about that. And backstage people, basically the choir has to take care of themselves.
like, where would you put a microphone to when you're trying to microphone 30 people? It's mind-boggling to me.
Well, they use shotgun mics, you know, right at the front, and we try not to have a mic'd sound. We just want to beef up, you know, the acoustic sound. So, I mean, that's a very specialized setup, and given left to the wrong people, you can sound like, you know, you've got this really heavily mic'd choir, and we don't really want that. We just want a little bit of boosting of the sound, not a big thing. Yeah.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for Kirk?
I was just going to ask Kirk whether you have any connections of any sort with some of the educational institutions. I'm thinking of places like McEwen and Victoria School and so on, where there would certainly add another element.
Well, that's interesting too. We've always been very cautious, you know, about approaching groups with young people.
Yes, yeah, I understand that.
You know, having said that, Scott Leadhead, who conducts the Kokopelli group of choirs, he actually, when he first moved to Edmonton, he actually joined EVM and was our assistant conductor for a while. And so, and there are other people connected with Victoria, I know, who know of EVM, and we have quite a few Victoria school grads in our choir, but we really tread carefully when it comes to that sort of thing. I think we're more likely to connect with other choral groups, or like next year we have a engagement to sing for the National Music Teachers Association that's meeting in Edmonton, and they want to do a program based on diversity, so they contacted us. So that's sort of where we're more comfortable with, and yeah.
And I think Edmonton Vocal Minority will come out and do special performances for like the ACT Center or some of the seniors residences. And are there any others, Kirk, that?
In the past, we used to do quite a few. We used to always perform at the UN International Day of Human Rights and at the AIDS Memorial thing. So we're always open to invitations. it's sometimes difficult, especially if it's an engagement that would be in the middle of the day, because most of our people do work. So we're not really happy to go out and sing with only half the choir, because that doesn't really tell people who we are. So every time we get an invitation, we kind of look, first of all, is the conductor available? Do we have someone who can be accompanist, and do we have enough singers to? I mean, if all we get are altos, I mean, can you imagine how horrible that would be? But so we're always open. We're always open. I mean, actually, sadly, I had to turn down. We were invited to sing the anthem at the hockey game there. They were having a queer night not too long ago. I don't know much about it, but because we don't have the number of singers to make that happen. I mean, 7 people standing there isn't going to impress anybody. But that's something we love to do, and so we will sing at seniors' places. We've got a couple that we regularly go to. And what's the other thing? So, oh, right. Yes, that we got involved with through one of our members, and it's a group of adults with developmental disabilities, and they absolutely love us. It is so cool. I mean, and it's a Christmas thing, so they just we come and we do our Christmas tunes, and then they get to sing Christmas songs. So that is a really rewarding experience for us. So there is a place on our webpage that people can go to and send us an invitation.
I see there's a couple more questions. Before we get to you, Paul, Joan had waved her hand without putting the little yellow one up. So go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Kirk, you sort of answered this question, but people can book you for private events, and how do you ascertain like the cost or the fee? If say someone had a function, not in the city or somewhere else, like out here in Gull Lake, for instance, is that a possibility? And how do you work that? Do you accept invitations like that, or?
Well, we have to go down the checklist, conductor, accompanist, and enough singers. And then often we do this without cost, but if, there are going to be, we're asking our conductor and accompanist and singers to spend money traveling somewhere, we'd probably, have a minimal cost. Often it will be, if it's an event that we have to get our accompanist, kind of hire him specially, we'll ask, maybe for $150, just so that way we can pay him for coming out and doing it. So, I mean, we don't do it to make money. We usually just do it to cover costs, but we're open.
Awesome.
To that. Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome.
Paul, please go ahead.
You described the cabarets very briefly, but you should actually, there's been lots of amazing stuff that happens during those cabarets, and some of the funniest instances I can remember, right, are the individuals who get up there on the stage and like perform. Some of them are amazing, some of them are
Are marginal.
Right?
I think that may be an attraction for some people in the choir too, because we have some really, really ace singers and performers, and our cabaret that we usually try to do every spring gives them the chance to be a soloist and or form small groups. So they go through an audition process. At the very beginning, we didn't do that, and we realized that was a big mistake. So now they do go through an audition process, and we do some coaching with them. And there have been just some performances, you know, that blow us all away. They're really excellent singers. Yeah.
One of my fondest memories is Lorna Murray and John Astachio doing the Vatican Rag, and that was at that was at the Garneau Community League at that time, right? And that was a fabulous cabaret. That was a wonderful one.
Yeah, I think Heather Bishop even came to that one. That was kind of cool. Yeah.
Anybody else? Well, I have one, Kirk. I could talk to you all day. This is such a treat for me. It's been 30 years for you with Edmonton Vocal Minority. Is there one particular highlight that you'd like to share with us?
One that really stands out and comes to mind right away is that after the shooting in Orlando a few years ago now, our concert ended up on the day after the shooting, and we really debated what we were going to do about it, because there were some really silly songs in there, but Darren really, you know, pulled it out of a hat, and it became a very affirming event. And there were people who showed up at the door, you know, buying tickets, who said, you know, I really hadn't planned to go, but I need to be somewhere with my people to celebrate and to mourn and that. So there were some serious parts of the concert, and that, you know, I think paid tribute to the events. But there are also some parts where maybe help people forget and celebrate a bit. And you know, just watching people's coming away from these events and seeing that we've done something to them. I mean, maybe it's the parents of one of the singers who've never done anything, you know, in the queer community ever before, and they just come away and they're like over the moon and really happy, and they can see how much this means to their children, and how they've become alive, you know, through the choir. So those are the things that really touch me and make me know that this is worth doing, and, you know, something I've missed the last 2 years. But I can see these people who are coming, you know, week after week, and even though the number is small right now, I mean, this is giving them something, and I'm glad for it.
Wow, how inspiring. Anyone else? Last call. Well, we'll give the final words to you, Kirk. Do you have any last minute comments for us?
Well, gala choruses in the United States have a slogan, and I can't remember it word for word, but music has such power to change us, to comfort us, to strengthen us. And this is something, you know, that I am really proud to be a part of. And I don't know another way in the queer community that I could have, you know, made any meaningful contribution. So I've gained so much from it, and I hope what I've been doing has given something to other people, and maybe inspire people that even though you're not fitting in with the political or other ways that you see the queer community asserting itself, maybe it's knitting or something, but who knows what difference that could make in the lives of a lot of people.
And any upcoming shows you wish to plug?
Oh, sure. Yes. We're doing a Pride concert finally on the 4th of June, and I'm going to paste the link in the chat. So first time in over 2 years, and we're really excited. There are restrictions involved, of course, and they'll be singing with masks, but they still sound pretty good. Yeah.
Must be exciting to get out to perform for real people.
No kidding.
Well, thank you, Kirk Kryvenchuk, for such an inspiring talk. Thank you too to Kim Laureen for all your technical experience and assistance. And thank you to all of you. I hope that we can see you all next week when Joanne Rauschenberger will talk about the Edmonton Pride History Bus. Please fill out the survey that we'll be sending to you shortly. And if you need to contact us, you can email us at agingwithpride@pridecenterofedmonton.ca. And now we'll close our meeting and I'll return the duties back over to our host, Kim.
I will see you all next week. Bye.